Thank you, Nareed. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. Happy snow day. I guess if you're on the call, that means you have power, or at least a generator. I'm happy to take complaints if anybody has any. But I always treat these as a reminder that we need to invest more in infrastructure in our country, including our electrical power infrastructure. So let today be another reminder of that. We are starting up another legislative session tomorrow. So I'm preparing for a lot of work in the next week. And we're really trying to get down to business after a month of high drama on Capitol Hill. Obviously, you know what we went through on January 6th and what we've been going through the inauguration. I want to thank everybody here who reached out to me and to my team to see how we were doing. The answer is we're doing fine. But this was not an easy thing for our country to go through. And we still have to address some of the consequences and ramifications. The good news is that the system worked. We have a new administration, we have a new Congress, and we are focused on doing our most important job right now, which is to try to deliver for our constituents and for the American people at a moment when we are still facing this terrible pandemic and economic crisis. It feels as if the light is at the end of the tunnel, finally, with the vaccines that are available. And yet I know there is a tremendous amount of frustration about the system and the slowness and the difficulty of getting appointments. I have a 80-year-old mom who still doesn't have an appointment. I know many people are in the same boat. So I share your extreme frustration, and I try to channel that frustration into just harder work on Capitol Hill to make sure that we finally have a federal government response that helps our states and local governments get this right. We've had the Biden administration in for just a couple of weeks right now. They are 100% dedicated to this. There's no shedding of responsibility to the states. They're about solving problems, not creating drama. But it is going to take a little bit of time for the effects of that to be felt by all of us in our daily lives. The most important responsibility Congress has right now is to try to work with the Biden administration to pass another relief bill for our economy and to speed up the vaccine distribution, which is the most important piece of getting Americans healthy again and getting our economy working again. As you may know, President Biden has proposed a $1.9 trillion plan, a very, very ambitious plan to do both of those things. There's been some pushback from some of my Republican colleagues, which is to be expected. There was an alternative proposal put forward yesterday by a group of 10 Republican senators led by Susan Collins. They asked for a meeting with President Biden, which I think he rightly and graciously said that he would want it, that he will do, so long as we move quickly. There is, I think, a preference in the country and among many of my colleagues, and I share this preference, to try to do these things in a bipartisan way, in a cooperative way, to see if we can find common ground. But at the end of the day, I know that what my constituents care about is not how we do it, but whether we do it and when we do it. The important thing is actually delivering the aid. And I've got some bottom lines, so I'm always willing to talk to folks on the other side to address things here and there. My bottom line is that we desperately need a significant infusion of resources in vaccine distribution and development, in getting more testing, because we still need a testing component of this, even as people are being vaccinated. We still don't know, because we're not doing enough sequencing in America. We still don't know exactly the effect being vaccinated has on our ability to transmit the disease. So we still need to, even as we get vaccinated, we still need to be tested occasionally. I think we absolutely need more stimulus payments, although I would like them to be as targeted as possible to those in our communities who need them the most. I would like to do some of the I think really wonderful and ambitious things that the president has proposed in this package. For example, creating a very generous child tax credit, $3,000 per child, which I actually think is an even better way of getting money in the hands of people who need it the most, and to do it quickly. It would be a refundable tax credit. It would come now. And the experts have told us that if we pass that, in addition to immediate help and immediate stimulus, it would cut child poverty in America by half. What a wonderful thing to do, while also trying to stimulate the economy out of this depression. And as you guys have heard me say many times before, another one of my bottom lines is that we need to have some help in these bills that we're passing for our state and local and county governments, direct assistance that goes to the smallest local government entities, not just to the largest ones. And I know that's of particular concern in Warren and Morris counties, given the size of our counties and our municipalities. This is something that every local and state government entity in America is going to be feeling for some time to come, because tax revenues, particularly sales tax revenues, are down. Property tax revenues, I think business tax revenues will over time suffer. And our state and local governments can't print money. They have to balance their budgets. So the only entity in America that can help with that and avoid avoid us losing vital services or seeing our property tax rates jacked up is the federal government. So that's something that's in the Biden plan. It can be cut back a little bit, but there's got to be something there. So my bottom line is, again, bipartisanship if we can, and I've joined the bipartisan group that drafted the last COVID bill, so I will be in the room where any bipartisan compromise is reached. But if we can't get an adequate bill, something ambitious and generous and swift, then I'm all for using whatever procedural mechanisms we may have available to us to do what needs to be done to help the American people now. So I'm sure you guys will have questions about that, and happy to go into much more detail if you like. So that's the immediate order of business. After relief comes recovery. My number one priority there, and I'm a broken record, is infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure. We have a historic opportunity right now in America with interest rates basically zero due to the COVID crisis to make a massive investment in fixing, upgrading, modernizing our country's infrastructure, whether it's roads, bridges, tunnels, railroads, airports, seaports, or some of the stuff that you don't normally think about when the conversation turns to infrastructure, like, as I mentioned before, our nation's electrical grid. And we have a historic opportunity, if we're going to do this, not just to create jobs now, but to speed our country's transition to the clean energy economy of the future. So once we've done COVID relief, and we will do something, that's going to be, I think, our next major order of business in the House of Representatives, to send the Senate a major green jobs infrastructure bill. It'll be great for New Jersey, great for the country. And we have, we're set up with the House and Senate in narrow Democratic hands, and with President Biden really wanting to do this to be able to get that done. So those are my immediate medium-term priorities. So much more that I know you guys will want to discuss. So I am eagerly looking forward to your questions and comments.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
We are now going to begin with a few frequently asked questions that were submitted beforehand. And after that, we will go into live questions. If your pre-submitted question was not answered in the FAQ portion, please ask it again using the chat feature for it to be answered by Tom live today. Just a reminder that if you would like to ask a question, please use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen, and I will add you to the list of questioners. Now would be a great time to start submitting those questions as well. All right, Tom, for your first pre-submitted question, what steps are being taken at the federal level to increase vaccine supply in New Jersey?
So I think we know, all of us, that the major problem right now, yes, there are problems with the state computer system and the websites. This seems to be a recurring problem that we've got to help our states resolve, whether it's for the unemployment system or for vaccine distribution. But the fundamental problem is lack of supply. The governor opened eligibility for the vaccine to a very large contingent of New Jerseyans, everybody over the age of 65, and a whole bunch of people under the age of 65 who have vulnerabilities, pre-existing conditions. And there's nowhere close to the supply that is needed to be able to cycle that large group of people through appointments anytime soon. And so that's a big reason for the frustration right now. What the proposed plan that I hope we will vote on quickly would do is, well, number one, it would allow for hiring up to 100,000 more healthcare workers to help with distribution. That's a critical piece of the puzzle. It would fund the establishment of more federally supported vaccination sites. So we're going to get one already in New Jersey that FEMA is going to set up. But under the broader plan that I want us to fund, there would be money for a whole bunch of community-based sites. So people won't have to travel as far. So there'll be simply more options, more places to go with more vaccine for people to get. And also on top of this, and on top of the money, we have President Biden doing what President Trump, for whatever strange reasons, was reluctant to do, and that is to use the Defense Production Act, this very important power that the president has to compel the private sector to produce items that are needed in a crisis, in a public health crisis, to speed the production of all of the other component pieces, the syringes, the vials, the PPE that is necessary to make mass vaccination, to make vaccination work at a mass scale and at a rapid scale. So those are some of the things that the president can do on his own and that we can do if we provide the resources in this legislation. And I think there's broad consensus around that in the Congress. And if for some reason we're stymied on some of the broader recovery money, I will be arguing for moving ahead very, very quickly with legislation that at the very least supports speeding up the distribution of the vaccine.
Great, thank you, Tom, for answering that.
Thank you.
After this next question, we will go into live questioning. So please just remember to use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen to submit your question to Tom to ask him live during this chat. Before we get to that, here's another pre-submitted question. I'm very concerned with misinformation resulting in domestic terrorism. Any update on your efforts regarding social media?
Well, thank you. I think we've all seen proof in the last few weeks that words matter, and that crazy stuff spreading online, whether it's QAnon or other conspiracy mongering or hate speech, it's not just words. It eventually leads to actions that hurt people. And we saw that in the Capitol building, obviously, on January 6th. It's not the first time, but maybe the first time that the whole country, I think, understood just how serious this this threat is. When you have thousands and thousands of people who are mostly just ordinary Americans, convinced that it was the right thing to do to try to violently attack the United States Capitol and potentially kill members of Congress to stop them from doing their jobs. These were not, you know, this was not like some small terrorist cell. This was thousands of people who, if you'd met them in normal times, you would think they're just ordinary Americans. And there are many things that have contributed to that event happening. But I think one of the most important trends, one of the most important negative trends in our country in recent years has been the way in which social media has divided us and has contributed to the spread of these crackpot conspiracy theories. And it happens not just because people are allowed to post crazy stuff on the internet. We are, and freedom of speech allows all of us to say wild, crazy, dishonest, hateful things. The problem isn't just that people are able to post it. The problem is that these social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, are designed to deliver to each and every single one of us more extreme versions of what we already believe. So as you all know, Facebook knows everything that you're doing online. They've got a profile of you. They know everything about you, what you think, what you love, what you hate, what you fear. And they figured out that if they give you more of what you hate, more of what you fear, more of what you already love, but particularly those negative emotions, you're going to be glued to your screen longer, and you're going to therefore see more ads, and you're going to buy more stuff, and they make more money. And so they've written their algorithms to feed each of us, again, more extreme versions of what we already believe. And so if you're a little bit on the left, it'll push you further left. If you're a little bit on the right, it'll push you further right. If you're a little QAnon, you become totally QAnon, because that's all they're going to let you see. So that's in background for those who haven't heard my pitch on this before. What I'm doing about it is I have legislation which has gotten a lot of national attention in the last few weeks, especially since January 6th, that basically takes away the social media companies' immunity from lawsuits for content that their algorithms amplify and promote, cause to spread throughout the internet, if that content can be shown to have contributed to an act of terrorism or another violent hate crime. And we cite certain statutes that are already in the US Code under which you can sue somebody if you think that they're responsible for that kind of terrible action. Right now, social media companies are totally immune. If you post something on Facebook that defames me, I can sue you, but I can't sue Facebook. I can't sue Facebook for the harm that is caused by causing that content to spread wildly across the internet. And so our legislation would change that. In the meantime, we've also, a number of us sent a letter that I wrote to Facebook, to Google, and to Twitter, demanding that they voluntarily start making some changes in how they recommend, how they amplify content online. Just a week ago, Facebook actually took one of the steps that we recommended in our letter to Mark Zuckerberg. They decided that they're going to permanently stop recommending that their users join groups dedicated to political and social issues. Sounds very innocuous, social issues, political issues. But in fact, as the company has acknowledged, a lot of their biggest political and social issue groups were basically hate groups. They were QAnon groups. They were groups that were promoting, in many cases, the kind of violent attack that we saw in the Capitol on January 6th. So, you know, this is the radicalization engine. We got to turn it off. And I'm going to make this one of my highest priorities this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. All right, next up, we're going to start beginning our live questioning. Again, please use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen if you would like to ask a question to the congressman. If you raise your hand, you still have to use the chat feature and submit your question beforehand. If your question was not answered that you previously submitted, we just please ask that you resubmit it again in the chat feature below. And to start, we have Jiri. Jiri, can you hear us? Jiri from Sukhasana. All right, we will move on.
Hi, I'm here.
There you are. There you
Okay, thank you. Hi, Tom.
Hi.
Thanks for all that you do. Great supporter. I have 3 questions. Why has the genome sequencing waned in the US? And what can Congress do to speed it up? Number 1. What is Congress doing to step up treatment and therapeutics for COVID-19? For some reason, that sort of has been sidelined, at least the information coming to us publicly. It's been, the focus has been on vaccine. The therapeutics people are not talking about. And number 3, why are teachers not in the front line to receive the vaccines?
Yeah, those are fantastic questions. And I'm not going to pretend that I know all the answers, particularly to your first 2 questions. So genomic sequencing is important as a way of understanding how the disease, how the pandemic is spreading, in particular, the emergence of new variants. You may have heard about new variants that are potentially more contagious arising in Great Britain and now in South Africa. The South African variant is apparently particularly concerning. And for whatever reason, the United States is behind in doing the genomic sequencing, which is necessary to track the spread. I know of a lot of experts who are trying to step up work in this area, and we absolutely need the CDC and the federal government with all of its resources and its megaphone pushing hard on that. I think, you know, what happened is that under the last administration, there was a heroic and commendable effort to speed up the development of a vaccine. The project Operation Warp Speed was a great success. We have to acknowledge that. But it seemed like that was really the only priority, and everything else fell by the wayside. You also mentioned the development of therapies for people who already have COVID. So, you know, Congress can help with resources, but just as important, we can help with oversight by asking the question. And we're now at least asking these questions of an administration that very much wants to answer them and to take responsibility rather than absolve itself of responsibility. Your question about teachers is a little bit different. That is, you know, there are choices that we have to make in the distribution of this vaccine. And personally, something that mystifies me about America's choice, the choice that we have made as a country, not just in New Jersey, is that we've prioritized, you know, to put it perhaps a little crudely and bluntly, we prioritize bars over schools. And I believe that's a mistake. I believe that we should be making a national choice, that there is nothing more important to the health and well-being of our society right now than being able to safely reopen schools, particularly K-8. Joe Biden seems to recognize this. He's set a goal of reopening physically every K-8 public school within 100 days. And I should have mentioned this in my opener, but a lot of the money in this bill that he has asked us to approve is designed to help our schools do what they need to do to become safe learning spaces. I also believe, and I've expressed this publicly, that teachers need to be higher up in line, teachers and other school personnel, when it comes to getting the vaccine. Right now, they're not even in the very large group that has been deemed eligible, not just in New Jersey. Again, this is nationwide. This is following the general advice of the CDC. I think they should not only be in that group, I think they should be ahead of that group. not so much for public. I mean, of course, you know, if you're a 35-year-old teacher, otherwise healthy, from a strictly public health point of view, I may not put you in front of my 80-year-old mom, for example, right? But there is this other overwhelming, overriding existential need that we have to give our kids a safe place to learn, to get them out of their homes, to give our parents a chance to get back to work. And again, particularly with the younger children, I think there's just general consensus that, you know, online Zoom education for 7-year-olds is just not, it's not what they should be doing for this long a period of time. And so that is my view. I've expressed it to our state officials. We're expressing that to the Biden administration. And well, I feel very strongly.
Can I sneak in one more quick question?
Yes.
How often does the Congress meet with CDC leaders? That's my last.
I mean, it's not a formal thing. You know, we will have hearings. We're set up again now to have oversight hearings. And so there will be formal sessions where administration officials, including the CDC, will come before us. And I know this administration will not resist congressional attempts to have that kind of oversight. But there are a lot of informal conversations, you know, get on the phone, call someone at CDC, sending them letters. I am working on a letter right now with some of my colleagues on this school issue. So that'll be a one way that we express that concern. So look out for that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jerry, and thank you, Tom. Our next question comes from Linda from Chester. Linda, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you for holding these Zoom town halls. My question has to do with the efforts being made to restore the SALT deductions. And what are the chances of that happening, in your opinion?
Great question, because there's, pandemic aside, there are a few things that are more important to us in New Jersey than tax fairness and our state being treated right by the federal government. We're all, or I think most of us, rightly angry that the 2017 tax bill, one of the worst bills Congress has ever passed, in my view, took away the full deductibility of state and local taxes, which was one of the few parts of the tax code that middle income homeowners in New Jersey, most of us, benefited from. A part of the tax code that has always been in the tax code going back to the earliest days of the federal income tax during the Civil War, and that was taken away. So I am 100% committed to this, as I've said in my now 2 campaigns. In my first campaign, I said that my goal, my first term in Congress, was to at least get something through the House of Representatives so that we could make clear how strongly we felt about this. I succeeded in that. We passed legislation in 2019 to fully restore the SALT deduction. It got buried in the Senate by then Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. We understood that that was likely to happen, but I still wanted to make that statement. McConnell is no longer Majority Leader, so that removes one obstacle, but it's still not going to be easy because, you know, there are all kinds of, you know, there's the filibuster rule in the United States Senate. Right now, I don't think we could get 60 votes in the Senate to fully restore the SALT deduction. But that said, here's the deal. I believe we're going to have to do a major tax bill at some point in the next 2 years for a couple of reasons. Number one, we have to find a way to pay for some of the things we've been doing to help the economy during COVID. And we need to do it with greater fairness in the tax code. I mean, there's just no way to justify the American people suffering as much as we have while our nation's billionaires, God bless them, are now on average around 40% richer than they were at the beginning of the pandemic, right?
Yes.
I'm not angry at them, right? They're just doing what they can to, like all of us, to do better, right? But clearly the way we're distributing the pain of this pandemic doesn't make a lot of sense. And so, we're going to do some things. We should be doing some things in the tax code to address that. Second, remember that 2017 tax bill. The only good news about it was that there were some middle class tax breaks that the Congress put in, but they're all expiring in 2021, 2022. The corporate tax cut isn't expiring, but those are. So there's going to be a lot of incentive for us to get back into that tax bill and see what we can do about that. Now, once we're doing that, the House has made clear, because of the bill I got passed, the SALT deduction has to be part of that conversation. It's got to be part of any bargain we strike. That's what I'm going to insist on. And, could we do it even with a filibuster? Well, there are, as you may be reading right now, there are procedural mechanisms that allow us to pass a couple of bills a year in the US Congress using, reconciliation is the technical term, that allow us to go with just 51 votes. So we will have, I'd say 2, 3, 4 shots in the next 2 years to pass spending and revenue bills under that procedure. And if one of those is a tax bill, then we should be able to do something on SALT. So that's my goal. That's my strategy. We'll do our very, very best.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you both. And just a reminder, if you have your hand raised, you must also ask your question using the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. I see a few people have raised their hands. Again, please use the chat feature if you would like to ask a question to Tom live. Next up, we have William from Phillipsburg. William, can you hear us?
I can. Hello, Congressman. Thanks for, again, hosting these fireside chats.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations on being named Vice Chairman of Foreign Affairs, a tremendous position, especially now after the 4 years of siloed kind of diplomacy that we've been working in the these last years. So my question for you is, what are the top priorities to re-engage us in the world that we're in?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. So as folks may know, I'm on 3 committees right now. I'm on Foreign Affairs, and I was elected Vice Chairman of that committee. I'm on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, where I get to work on all of the infrastructure investments that I mentioned, the Gateway Tunnel, all the other things we need in New Jersey. And I was also just named to the Homeland Security Committee, where I'm going to concentrate on this fight against domestic terrorism and extremism. So in terms of our foreign policy, look, I hope, and I know we're hurting at home, right? And our first responsibility has to be to deliver for the American people. But I think we all saw in this pandemic another reminder that we are part of the world. We are connected. Our fate is connected to the fate of others. And problems abroad can come home to America. This pandemic is a problem abroad that came home to America, partly because we were neglecting global public health leadership, and partly because we have a dictatorship in China that was suppressing information, that was arresting people who were trying to blow the whistle about this emerging disease in late 2019. So again, that's just one more piece of evidence, if we need it, that we do need to be concerned about what's going on in the wider world. In terms of my priorities, I'd actually start with COVID. Some things are obvious, like we got to restore our alliances. We've got to become a leader in the United Nations again. We have to be champions of democracy and human rights around the world, because we're a country with a conscience, and that's what distinguishes us from our enemies, from our adversaries. But I think that a very early priority should be to make sure that as we are taking care of the American people, getting every American vaccinated, that we are also doing our part as a world leader to make sure everybody gets this vaccine. If we don't kill this pandemic in Africa and in Asia and in Latin America, it's going to come home to America again, right? Especially as it mutates into new variants. So it's not just the right thing to do. It's very much in our interest. And right now, the United States and the other rich countries in the world, we have reserved basically the entire global vaccine, projected supply of the vaccine. So there'd be nothing left for the poorer countries. And we've reserved more than we would need for ourselves, which is fine, so long as we're willing to work with our allies to make sure that at the appropriate time, this is available to others. It's also a great opportunity for our diplomacy, because I can tell you, countries around the world desperately want the American vaccine. They desperately don't want to be dependent on a Chinese or a Russian vaccine. Why? Because they trust us. They trust our system, our rule of law. They trust it'll be safe. So it's a great, as it becomes available, again, New Jersey first, right? But as it becomes available, this will be a great piece of currency for America to restore our place of leadership and trust in the world, as we, basically provide the thing that the people and governments around the world want so desperately from us. So we'll be looking into that and encouraging that on the committee that I'm going to help to lead over the next year. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks, William. All right, this next question was written in. Tom, what are you actually doing for your district besides bashing Trump? And what have you accomplished that benefits Warren County?
Well, thank you for the question. And it's perfectly fair because my first responsibility is to make sure I deliver for folks back home in my district. And what have we done for Warren County? There's quite a lot, beginning with the CARES Act, right? The major piece of legislation that we did get through early last year to help keep the American economy alive. Warren County got, just for, say, small businesses in Warren County, we were able to deliver, and actually this is just in my part, because I represent just part of Warren County, just in my part of Warren County, we were able to deliver loans to over 400 businesses, supporting over 4,000 jobs, thousands and thousands of folks just in my corner of Warren County were able to benefit from the unemployment, the pandemic unemployment insurance. And my office, my team worked and continues to work 7 days a week to help people who have individual problems with those claims. Many of them were in Warren County. My office helped to obtain a whole bunch of specific grants for institutions in Warren County. Warren County Community College received grants under the CARES Act. Separate from the COVID relief effort, we worked hard to get a grant, I think it was about a $400,000 grant to preserve the Musconectong watershed. Speaking of environmental issues, the Penn East Pipeline, something I've heard so much about from constituents in both Hunterdon and Warren counties. I haven't just made statements about it. I haven't just checked the box to say, hey, I'm against it. We have worked our hearts out to try to make sure that that pipeline doesn't get built. And the day before Joe Biden was sworn in, the Penn East people went to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the last day of the Trump administration, to try to get permission for this thing to start getting built. And they said no, and they cited our opposition, my office and other members of Congress. So we've been effective in protecting folks in Warren County from something that would be incredibly harmful to landowners and to the environment. A lot of other things, something that a concern I heard on a visit to Phillipsburg in 2019, the potential passage through Phillipsburg of rail cars carrying liquid natural gas. I remember asking the fire chief in Phillipsburg, what would you do if there were a spill of liquid natural gas from one of those rail cars? This is an incredibly volatile substance. And he said, I'll tell you what I would do. I would immediately evacuate the entire town of Phillipsburg just from one spill, which was the right answer, I'm afraid. And this was something that the Trump administration was planning to allow. They issued a rule allowing the transit of this incredibly dangerous substance in rail cars that we felt were substandard, not up to the task of safely carrying them. We raised a major ruckus about it. And in the opening days of the Biden administration, the new administration announced that they were reviewing that rule, and I presume that means that they're going to cancel it. So score another one for folks along that train route, many of whom live in Warren County. So, you know, that's my first responsibility, and that's what I'm going to continue to do. And at the same time, yeah, I'm going to speak out about what I think is right and wrong. I'm going to speak out for principles like the rule of law and telling the truth and decency and respecting our institutions, respecting the outcome of our elections. I think I can do both. I can fight for New Jersey families and I can fight for American values. And that's what I'm going to continue to try to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Our next question comes from Janet from Ledgewood. Janet, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Tom, I'm a retired teacher, and I'm very appalled that Marjorie Taylor Greene is on the Education Committee. Is there anything to be done?
Yeah, well, she shouldn't be in Congress, much less on the Education Committee. This is somebody who continues to promote just awful conspiracy theories, including, like, you know, the Sandy Hook massacre of school children didn't happen, and 9/11 didn't happen, and QAnon conspiracy theories. And like, this person should have nothing to do with the committee that's about teaching our kids. She was put on it by the Republican leader in the House. That's the way committee assignments are made. Each party assigns their members to various committees, but we do have a mechanism for objecting to that. And there will be, in addition to letters and statements that I've already signed, I believe as early as this week, there will be a move to try to formally block her from membership on that committee. Frankly, she should not be a member of any committee. That would be one way that leaders in her party can signal that they don't tolerate that kind of just crackpot extremism, which, as I mentioned before, is not just words, right? There are people out there who become radicalized by those words to do violence. And we've got to say at this point, enough is enough. The basic requirement, I think, of respectable membership, participation in a body like the House of Representatives today, is that you stand against these extremist groups, whether it's QAnon or the Proud Boys or the Boogaloo Boys or the 3%ers or the Oath Keepers or whatever they want to call themselves. If they support violence against the American people and the United States government, if they are promoting theories that are polluting the minds of Americans, radicalizing them to violence, then we've got to be together and stand against that. That's, you know, not a Republican thing, not a Democratic thing. If it happens on the left, we need to do the same thing. That's you know, when we talk about unity, that's what we got to be united against. So yeah, absolutely, we'll do what we can, and you know, we'll see where, you know, we'll give the Republicans in the House a chance to tell us who they are and what they believe.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Janet. Next up, we have Neil from Long Valley. Neil, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Hey, Neil.
Hello, and again, thank you for holding these. My question's about infrastructure and greener transportation. I mean, given the highly partisan atmosphere and a thin Democrat majority, what more can the federal government do to speed greener transportation? You mentioned infrastructure. Can you give some details?
Yeah. So what I'm really interested in is how to depolarize take the partisanship out of the debate about clean energy and climate change. And I think the way to do that is to talk about the extraordinary economic opportunity we have in being the country that leads the world to clean energy. I mean, this is probably the single greatest predictable economic revolution in world history, that we're going to be moving from fossil fuels to clean energy. We know that it's happening. We don't know how long it's going to take, and we don't know which country is going to lead the way. But shouldn't it be in our interest? Isn't it in our interest as a country to ensure that it's the United States that leads the way, not China, not Europe, not India, not Brazil, not any other country, but us, our companies, our scientists, our young people. And I think if you frame it that way, people tend to come together around that goal. I know that much of corporate America, which wasn't there 5 or 10 years ago, would now agree with everything that I just said. Of course, climate change is real. We have to protect ourselves, right, against the huge cost of storms and other harms that are going to come through, that are already being felt because of climate change. But also they want to seize the opportunity. They want to be the clean energy providers to the world. And what they ask of us is give us the market certainty, pass regulations and tax incentives that are going to reward those companies that move the most at the most rapid pace in that direction. So that's the argument that I make, and that I think tends to not make my Republican colleagues run away. And we'll have a chance, I think, this year, as we're passing this infrastructure legislation, to put the argument to a test. Because we're going to do something on infrastructure, right? Everyone agrees we got to fix things. Everybody agrees we got to create jobs to help us recover from this economic downturn. But can we come together and agree that if we're gonna spend those dollars and create those jobs, it should be encouraging more mass transit. It should be putting up more electric charging stations for our cars. It should be upgrading our national electric grid so that as we generate more electricity through wind and solar and have more things, our homes and our cars powered by electricity, we can actually handle the distribution of that electricity. I think to me, it's self-evident the answer is yes. And I hope that if you make the argument in those practical terms, just about everybody will agree.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Neil, and thanks, Tom. All right, just so everyone knows, we are going to stay on this call until about 4:15. So now is still your chance to ask questions using the chat feature. We still have a few to go into, but if you have a question, again, please submit through the chat feature. Next up, we have Caroline W. Caroline, can you hear us? Caroline. All right, that's okay. Moving on. Next, we'll take, let's see, Michael from POHATCOM. Michael, can you hear us?
Oh. Yes. Oh, do we have Caroline first?
Yes, I thought I was on unmute. I'm sorry.
No worries. Michael, we'll take you next.
Sure.
I apologize for that.
Great.
Hi, Tom. How are you?
Good.
Good. I have a question. I live in White Township in Warren County, and we have a major issue with developers trying to come in and purchase a lot of our prime farmland. And I'm wondering how and what you're doing to kind of protect us.
Yeah. So is that the warehouse development? Is that what you're?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I've heard a lot about that. And, to be honest, I've heard from both sides, right? Because there is, I think, a great desire to see more economic development in Warren County, to bring Phillipsburg back, to something more like what it was in decades past. And so some people are, very interested in bringing in these warehousing jobs. And at the same time, I know there's a lot of concern about what this does to farmland and open space and to the environment and traffic. So look, what I can say is that the kind of development I most want to see in those towns, particularly in Phillipsburg, is something that brings in more tourists, more young people who want to live there, to do something like what we've been able to do with some of the river towns in Hunterdon County that have become such attractive destinations. I'm not 100% against warehouse development, but it does need to, there needs to be careful scrutiny of the environmental impact. That's a state responsibility, but an issue that I can certainly raise and will raise with state agencies that are supposed to be regulating it. And then finally, I mentioned the traffic impact. I am concerned about what's happening already on 78. And, with more and more heavy trucks, which of course that comes with warehouses, and with truck safety. And that's something as a member of the Transportation Committee that I've been following closely, and I think will be taking on as an even greater priority this coming year. There are all kinds of steps that can and should be taken to protect motorists, all of us, from accidents that are caused by heavy trucks in our country. Mandating automatic emergency braking systems, mandating underrides, not just on the back of the trucks, but on the side of the trucks. When you have a giant truck and a very small car can get stuck under the truck in a collision, it's one of the major sources of passenger death. Doing more to regulate hours and for drivers and protect against sleep apnea. Again, another major source of accidents. So that doesn't directly answer the question of whether the warehouses should go up. That's a local development and environmental policy question that's more likely to be settled, again, locally and at the state level. But one of the impacts that I am particularly concerned about is highway safety in the trucks. And that's something I've got a more direct say on as a member of that committee.
Well, what I was questioning is Route 519, because okay. I'm not sure if you are aware, but I mean, we're already at a level D. And if they put in, I think it's like 2.9 million square feet of warehousing is wanting to be built on 519, like I said, in White Township.
Yeah.
And the traffic there, I mean, we would have to widen our roads. We would lose 300 and something houses. It would just be horrible for our area. I just hope that maybe you can look into it a little bit.
I promise we'll do that. And thanks for bringing that to my attention. I know there are, related concerns about solar farms that we hear from a lot of constituents. So, keep bringing these things to my office. Sometimes, again, there's a federal element where I can directly take a stand or intervene. Sometimes it's a state issue, often it's a state issue, but even there, my team and I have conversations with folks in Trenton a lot, and always happy to take things up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you both. All right, next up, let's go to Michael. Michael, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you very much, Representative Malinowski, for all your efforts, and also the efforts of your office, who've been trying to be very helpful with so many of the New Jersey residents who have been unemployed and highly underemployed this last year. There is a strong federal connection with the PUA, payments for self-employed workers. And there seems to be such a logjam because of the overwhelming nature of this problem, that there just simply aren't nearly enough workers at the New Jersey level to help put these things through. I have been told in August, from the one time I could get through on a phone line, that they were putting it through and still nothing has happened for me. And your office is trying to help, but what can be done to help so many people in need at this time?
Well, first of all, I'm really sorry that you're still in that category. I know it can't possibly frustrate me more than it frustrates you, but it is very frustrating when we pass this legislation and we think, okay, we've helped people. And then months later, a person who was meant to be helped is still feeling that frustration. So anyway, I'm glad you're in touch with my office. I'm sure you'll be in touch again after this call, and all I can say is we'll do our best. We've spoken, we speak daily to the Department of Labor in Trenton, right, which is the agency. It's federal money, but it's implemented by state agencies, as you pointed out. And they are responsive to us. They try, but they're working with completely antiquated systems, 40-year-old computer systems, all kinds of things that need to be brought into the 20th century, and then maybe the 21st eventually. And, they have pleaded with me when we complain to them, like, we actually, there needs to be, as part of this, this federal funding you're providing in this emergency, there needs to be some resources for upgrading these decrepit old state systems for distributing assistance. And I agree with that. And that's one of the reasons why I've been really insisting on having some direct state and local aid in one of these pandemic bills. And, we got, again, McConnell and company, for whatever reason, didn't want to do that. They said, oh, it's a bailout for Democrat states, blah, 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 even though just about every state in the country, whether they're so-called blue states or red states, has expressed a need for the same thing. So I would very much, before we're done spending this money, providing this relief, I'd very much like to provide a little bit of help for like our state unemployment agencies to fix those problems so no one else has to go through what unfortunately you're still going through. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks for being patient as well. Next up, we have Jacqueline from Mine Hill. Jacqueline, yes.
Hello.
Hey, Jacqueline.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Malinowski, for having these calls. I really appreciate it. I'm new to Mine Hill, just moved to Morris County in the last couple of months, and I'm just very pleasantly surprised at your outreach. So thank you for that. My question has to do with education. K through 12, higher education. I realize it's a complex issue, but how do we get education back on track? And I guess what I'm asking is this going to be a coordinated effort to discuss the problems and to kind of roll out solutions and to discuss solutions, or is it all going to be piecemeal, or is there some coordination going on to help have really good solutions?
Yeah. So you mean getting the system back on its feet from COVID, right?
Yeah.
So yes, that's the whole point of what we're trying to do right now, between the Biden administration and the bill that we're trying to pass. Public education in America is obviously mostly a state and local responsibility, but this is a national crisis, and there's no way that state and local school districts acting alone in competition with each other can deal with this. We need national leadership and guidance and resources. And so, this is why Biden came in and said, you know, we want to open every K-8 school within 100 days. You start with that goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
President, okay, that's what we got to do. Then you ask your team, all right, what do we need to do to make that happen? All right, maybe that means vaccinating teachers early, as I think. It means, yes, money for schools to make their facilities safer for kids and teachers and school personnel who are coming back, installing ventilation systems, expanding their physical space so that kids can be more distant from each other in those initial months. You know, that's the kind of stuff that we would be funding in our legislation. And if these things don't come from the federal government, then it's not gonna work. For example, back to the teachers being tested question, like where should they go? I know there are people screaming at Phil Murphy about this and maybe screaming at their local school boards, but at the end of the day, you can't, there's going to be a national standard. One state is not going to be able to say, well, we're going to do it differently from another state. Everybody's following CDC guidelines here, because then they can say, well, we're just following CDC guidelines. Don't hold me responsible, right? And so the solution to this, if we want a different ordering of priority for who gets the vaccine, I think has got to come from the federal government, so that the states can, again, just say they're following the guideline. So that's my thinking on it, and I'm trying to light fires on this issue wherever I possibly can, because I think it's so important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jacqueline, and thanks, Tom. Next up, we have Russ from Chester. Russ, can you hear us? Russ,
yes, I can.
Hey, Russ.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it. Hey, I wonder if you could just very quickly tell me what your position is early on with the relief package that President Biden has sort of brought to the fore.
Yeah. So I spoke about that a little bit in my opening remarks. So
I apologize. I missed the first part.
No worries. But just to, you know, the brief recap, he proposed a big bill, $1.9 trillion. It's got a lot of things that I think are vital. My preference would be to try to find some bipartisan agreement if we can, because I think that's better for the country. The country wants it, because you know, we are only, you know, if we do things in a more partisan way, under the rules of the Senate, we only have a couple of opportunities to do that in the coming year, and I'd rather not waste one of those opportunities now if we can get bipartisan agreement on a COVID relief bill. So I'm glad that Biden's meeting with, there's a group of 10 Republican senators who are coming to the White House this week. They proposed a much smaller plan. I think if they're willing to significantly bargain up and do things like the state and local direct aid, you know, some aspect of the child tax credit that Biden has proposed, you know, a lot of school money, even if it's not 100% of what he's proposed, then I think we can do a deal. If not, then we do have a procedural mechanism called reconciliation through which we can get this passed with 50 votes plus one, plus whatever Republicans go along with us, but maybe not 60 in the Senate. So one way or another, we will get something done. But I mentioned some of the things that are my top priorities.
Just mentioned timeframes, if you could, please. What is the expectation?
Yeah, I think, so we are, this week in the House, we will do what is needed to get the reconciliation process going. This is a very complicated procedural move under the budget rules in case we need to do this without 60 votes in the Senate. So we will do our part in the House this week to set up that possibility. In the meantime, I'm hoping that we make progress on a bipartisan deal. because I think what we all agree on, certainly the White House and most of us in the House, is that some of this needs to be very, very quick. The vaccine money, the money for speeding the distribution of the vaccine is particularly important. So one possibility, again, I'm sort of gaming this out for you. I don't know what's going to happen. One possibility is that we agree very quickly, like in the next couple of weeks, to a smaller bill that includes the vaccine money and extension of unemployment and other things that are fairly easy. And then we use this more complicated procedure to push through a much bigger, more ambitious bill in the next, say, month and a half. Another possibility is they would agree on something bigger sooner, or even push through something bigger sooner. But we have multiple options. Main thing is great sense of urgency, particularly on the vaccine, speeding the vaccine distribution.
Great, Tom. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Russ. All right. Next up, we have Pat from, Pat S. Pat, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Hi, Pat.
Hi, Tom. Back to the social media that you're addressing. I was wondering if you thought that cable news is just as important as social media in terms of lies, spreading conspiracy theories, inciting violence. And if so, what can you do about that?
Yeah, I think, well, cable news is pretty darn important, obviously. I'm not sure if it's bad. I don't think it's quite as bad as in terms of the impact it's had as Facebook, Google, and Twitter, particularly Facebook and YouTube, because those services, those platforms, are literally designed to push us in one direction or another. Everybody's on the internet, and every one of us is subjected to the kind of hidden, subtle effect of these algorithms. Not all of us watches Fox or MSNBC or OAN, but all of us are on the internet, so all of us are vulnerable to the algorithmic amplification of information and news that pushes us apart from our neighbors. So that's why I've been focused more on social media. Now, on cable news, the question is what can be done about it? Some people have suggested that we apply the so-called fairness doctrine that was a big part of how the federal government regulated broadcast media to cable news, equal time for competing points of view and so forth. The problem with that is that it'd be very, very hard to do. Broadcast media was regulated by the federal government because they used the airwaves, and the federal government regulated, I mean, airwaves are a limited number of frequencies, and so the federal government doled them out to television stations, for example, and was able to then demand conditions in exchange for the privilege of using those airwaves. Cable doesn't work that way, and it would be very hard to see how we could establish that degree of national regulation. So I think realistically, the more, if you are concerned about cable news, the better way to approach this is to put pressure on cable news channels through their advertisers, and that's proven to be pretty effective. When the public demands that corporate America refuse to advertise on shows that promote hate and division, the owners of cable news stations, who are there after all to make money from advertising, they take notice. So I think that's probably the best way to go.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Pat.
Thanks, Pat, and thanks, Tom. And thanks everyone for joining this call today. We are nearing the end. And I just want to remind everyone that our office keeps residents up to date on the latest in Congress and our latest events through our e-newsletter. You can subscribe to these updates by visiting malinowski.house.gov www.zoom.com/contact/newsletter/subscribe. I will also drop that into the chat feature as well. And again, thank you everyone for participating, and I'm going to turn it over to Tom for closing remarks.
Thank you, everybody. Great questions as always. It's great to have these opportunities, especially when we can't meet in person, to hear from you, to get a sense of what you think I should be doing in Congress, but also some of the local issues that you've brought up that I need to know about and my team needs to know about. So to everybody who raised a question or concern, thank you so much. You're enabling me to do a better job, and that's why I'm going to keep coming back and keep doing these Zoom events as often as we can until we can get back to doing live town halls. And even then we may do some Zoom events because there are folks who may not be able to come to a live town hall, but who can tune in from their living room. One way or another, we're going to stay in touch. I'm going to be here to take your questions, to hear your concerns, your complaints, whatever you feel your representative in Washington needs to hear. So with that, thanks again. Enjoy the snow, stay safe and healthy, everybody, and look forward to the next chance we have to talk. Bye-bye.